Okay. So, yeah, I found you through Astral Reflections, and it's so funny to see you in person because, when you really enjoy someone's website, you never think you're actually going to meet them, but
Right.
your predictions, or I don't know if you want to call them predictions, but insights are always seem to be really accurate, and even though it's a generalization because it's not including someone's birthday, it's a
That's right.
general for each
Yeah.
sign, it's still pretty accurate. So I always think that you seem like such a great astrologer. I guess if you can tell anyone watching like who you are and about how you got into astrology and where
Oh,
you're
okay.
from.
Good autobiography. Okay. I was born in Boston, actually, in the US. Came to Canada when I was 7 years old, to Vancouver, still here. Um, I just, the way I got into astrology is I was at University of British Columbia, and I just started reading the newspaper horoscopes for some reason.
Oh,
They
wow.
seemed to make some sense. Sidney Omar, who is probably one of the greats, but is dead now. Um, and I started testing it. I was probably in, I don't know, second or third year at UBC. I just started testing it. It seemed to work, and so I started studying it. And that's that, I guess. I went on and got a master's, etc. But anyway, I just started writing a column, and then other newspapers picked it up, and then finally it got to the Daily here, province. Um, and then a little syndicate bought me out of that, and about 8 years ago, 2012 anyway, they phoned me up and said, we don't need you anymore, goodbye. So the blog has just been going on from then.
Well, that's great that
uh,
you continued. Yeah.
yeah, well, I don't get paid for the blog. Well, some people
Oh,
send in donations, which is
okay.
nice.
Yeah.
I get $100 or something from some Hollywood. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's
I get
nice.
little donations, but some
That's
Hollywood
really
actors
nice.
sent me 200 or $250. But anyway,
Oh,
I keep the blog going because it creates clients.
I guess you can't say who that actress is.
Actor, actually.
Oh, actor. Are you able to reveal or no? No,
No.
I guess not. It would be
All right.
interesting to know what actors, are that interested in astrology. They're just like
Well,
us.
he was a nice guy, and I would say he's probably mid 30s. That's
Okay,
all I can
well,
say.
that's a good enough tip. Well, that's cool. So that's how many years have you been doing this?
Um, I think I started writing my first column in '79.
Oh,
So
wow.
89,
Wow.
09, 19, about 43 years, 42 years.
Wow. That is so
Yeah.
cool. And that's
Yeah.
cool that you weren't raised around it. You just kind of came across it. So,
Yeah.
because you always think people in this kind of esoteric field kind of get um,
And
exposed
esoteric
to it.
parents.
Yeah, like exposed to it at an early age or something. But
Actually, my son, when my son was around 10, 11, 12 in that area, he wanted to learn astrology because he wanted to do what I did, right? I
wow,
discouraged him.
why is
I, I,
that?
I discouraged him because astrologers in general don't make any money.
Oh,
You know,
because
most
of
of
the
them,
money. Okay.
yeah, they live in basement suites, et cetera, et cetera.
Really?
Yeah, I'm lucky because I had a column, so I was well known. So
Right.
I would make a fair amount of money, but most astrologers, no.
And do you do other things like to maintain your
Oh, well,
income
yeah,
or?
I owned a business, actually, a distribution business.
Oh,
Had
wow.
about 100, 120 employees.
Wow.
Um,
And I guess that company wasn't to do with astrology, or was that what?
no, it's just delivery of,
Okay.
of, of flyers, newspapers,
Oh,
etc.
okay. So you had
So
other things going on.
yeah, that went on till about I think I quit that in 2000. I sold it, and well, actually, I sold it in the mid '90s, and then I quit it in 2000. That was my main nest egg or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't think about that, but if you're in that kind of field, you would probably need something else to balance out the income because
Yeah,
it's not
but
something, it's not
most
everybody's go-to.
yeah, but most astrologers that are known, like who have books out, or the astrologers that are in that 10%
Yeah,
top astrologers, most
in
of
the
them actually,
media.
yeah, they have well, if they get a media, like there's the fellow that wrote for England, he just died 2 or 3 years ago, wrote for
Mhm.
English newspapers. He was making 1.5 million pounds a year. The paper was paying him.
Wow,
My paper, the biggest they ever paid me was $250. I
it's
think
quite
now,
the difference.
yeah, yeah. But they're mad for
Wow.
astrology there, I guess.
It,
Um,
and you said England? Or
yeah, England, yeah, in
that's
London.
crazy. I would never think that, but that's interesting.
Oh, yeah. It's really well paid.
Wow.
Um,
So have you ever thought about moving there?
I almost bought a townhouse, yeah, in Dover,
Oh,
because I thought that'd be you know, that'd be a nice base to travel to France and all over Europe from, but I somehow never did it.
yeah,
Uh,
I've never been there, but that's on my list.
what bothers me about England is it's so Canadian. You know, I mean,
What is that?
well, living in Canada and you go to Britain, it's so similar. The people are so similar. The ideas are so similar. It's almost like, it's like your backyard or something. It's not very,
Really?
yeah.
I thought because you drive on the other side,
Oh yeah,
it
there's
makes everything the opposite. And I always thought they're more right brain thinkers just because everything is backwards and you're using the right hemisphere, which is the more artsy, musical, like great, amazing music comes from England. So I always thought that had something to do with
well, that's true. Since the Beatles, yeah.
it. Would I be able to jump in with some questions? And then
Oh sure.
if you feel like they're not really questions that you can answer unless you're doing someone's charts, then just tell me and we can pass.
Yeah, it
Um,
depends. But yeah.
yeah, because I guess with my background, like I'm obviously an amateur, but I've always loved astrology since I can remember. Like I must have been in grade school or early high school, maybe late grade school, and I just found that I was like stuck, and it's like I needed some self-awareness. Like I just didn't understand myself and my connection to other people, and I found that suddenly astrology, when I came across some books in the library, it kind of made me feel like, oh, I get it now. Like, oh, that's why I'm like that. Oh, that's why they're like that.
Yeah, that's
And
actually one of the main functions of astrology is validation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is. And I think a lot of people don't get that. Like the people
Yeah.
who are kind of either against astrology or just like not
Yeah.
into the pseudo side of science. And I always say it's based on calculations and numbers. So it's not really, um,
Somebody once said that astrology is a science based on fantasy.
well, I mean, that's not inaccurate, but I can see how they would say that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm always curious. I didn't write this question as one of my on my list, but how do the calculations occur? Like, how do you measure stars? How does that happen? How do they get those
Oh,
calculations?
well, basically, most astrologers, myself included, we stick with the sun, the moon, and 8 planets. There's actually 9 planets, but we don't count the Earth because that's where we are, right?
Right.
And really don't go much beyond that. There are, for instance, a woman called Robson has about in the 1950s came out with this,
Mm,
but there's just a book that described the meanings of every star, every major star, and stuff like that.
mhm,
Um, for example, 15 Leo right now, 15 degrees Leo. There's
mhm.
30 degrees in every sign. A degree is approximately a day long. But
Okay.
15 degrees Leo right now is known as a huge ruler, like hugely
Mm,
magnetic, et cetera, right? There's a star there right now called Rigel, which means ruler. And that'll
wow.
stay there for about 70 years. And then slowly by precession, that star will move out of that degree. So you get things like that. So stars do have some kind of, I hate to call it influence, but I don't think anything has influence per se. I think
Mhm.
everything's an indicator. Okay.
Right.
Like if you look at it, we could say everything is a pattern. So everything that happens on Earth, there's no saying, hermetic saying, which says as above, so below. So everything that occurs on Earth kind of reflects a pattern that's out in the sky.
Hmm.
And there are many, many patterns. Like West Coast indigenous people, they can always tell you when it's going to rain because they watch the maple leaves and they start to curl. That means it's going to rain.
Wow.
So there's an indication, and it's not, you could say it's scientific, but it's the same as we say, well, the leaves curl. Well, Venus is in Aries, or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
I
So,
guess I envisioned um that, like, kind of like someone told me about palm reading, like they would have thousands and thousands of like comparisons to other people's hands, and eventually they would get kind of like a theme on different lines and different symbols. So I wondered
yeah.
if that was similar to astrology, or if astrology is solely based
Uh,
on like
well, a
math
little bit.
and calculations.
The math and calculations are simply to tell you where the sun or moon
Yeah.
or planets or rising sign or other points
Yeah. So
are.
how do they get to
So,
those interpretations then?
well, once you found out where they are, then say you're a modern
Mm,
astrologer or astrology student, you'd
mm.
say, oh, yeah, well, by the calculate. The thing is, you don't have to calculate anymore because computers
No,
got it.
no, but I'm just thinking,
But
how did they figure it
yeah,
out back then?
well, so say you say, oh, okay, say you're an astrology student and say, oh, okay, Venus is in Aries for these 21 days. So I'm going to go to the book and say, well, what does Venus and Aries mean? See, and
Hmm.
then you start to get
Yeah.
the, and what,
But how did they figure out that in the first
well,
place? Venus and
that's
Aries, like how do they even come up with that?
a good question. Well, I think simply by observation. It was simply
Okay.
empirical observation.
That's what I
Astrology has
thought.
been going on for, she's at least 4,500 years old. So what
Wow.
astrologers have done from the beginning is say, that's there, what's happening here? And like,
Hmm.
oh, there's a big war. How come?
Hmm.
Where's Mars, which rules war? So there's Mars, and it's square this country's sun, so they got a war.
Yeah.
Um, it's just that. And slowly over centuries and centuries and centuries, a lore, Lore, a lore gets built up. And then you can
Hmm.
always go back and reference the lore and say,
Right.
I don't know what this means, but what does it mean? And it'll look it up.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is that there's no standard.
Hmm.
So this lore is the real regulator of the lore of the, the cache of information is
Hmm.
simply time, because
Hmm.
time will destroy what's false and will keep what's real.
Yeah.
So the things that come from 2,000 years ago in astrology are likely to be a little more reliable than some astrologer just said, oh, this is what this is, 2 years ago, right?
Hmm.
Because what he says might not prove true in the long run. So basically, you're always referencing the old knowledge.
Right. And that's what I thought. That's what I thought, that there was a lot of referencing and empirical research.
Yeah, the lore is basically empirical.
Hmm.
Scientists hate us to say that because they
Yeah.
think it's all fantasy, but really it is basically empirical. It's watching, observing, and noting
Well,
what happens.
there's something to it, because
Mhm,
in my opinion, like from my experience, it seems to be very accurate.
mhm.
And, I had a lot of just trouble understanding myself. And I have like a kind of complicated chart.
Well, tell me what's your sign.
I'm a Gemini.
25 Gemini. It's very. You might be at 25 Gemini, it's an extremely intelligent degree,
Oh.
but if you're 24, you're very friendly, more than intelligent. If you're 26, you're like a premier we used to have in BC called Vanderzam. Just argue with everybody about everything. So
Mm.
if
I,
you don't
I'm
argue, you're
I'm
either
more.
very friendly or very intelligent.
So how do I know which one?
Well, that's where the math comes in. We'd have to take your time graph and then
Ah,
find out
because
exactly where the sun was.
I always find that people born in May Geminis are very smart. I don't know what it is, but they seem to be
Yeah.
the smartest Geminis.
Well, I don't know if they're the smartest, but they're the quickest
The quickest,
because
that's a good way to say it.
most Geminis are very fast and
Yeah, yeah,
click, click, click.
yeah.
Uh, anyway, some of the
Well,
smartest people in the world have been Taurus, not Gemini. You know,
ah,
Karl
I
Marx,
mean,
Shakespeare.
oh yeah, I think there's like extremely smart people in any sign, but
Naturally, yeah,
I guess within Gemini, I always found, but I think you're right that quick is the right word. They're very quick-minded, very
yeah.
intelligent that way,
Yeah.
the ones born in May. I'm not a typical, like I have Gemini traits, but I have a lot of water in my chart, so
Yeah.
I'm very influenced by that, and it makes me
Yeah.
sensitive, and so
Yeah. Yeah. You can have a water rising sign too.
I do.
Depends.
Yeah.
Or do you? What's your moon sign? Do you know?
Sagittarius.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good. You're a full moon baby.
Am I?
Like you were born on a full moon. Yeah, because the moon was
Okay.
opposite the sun.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
That's
that.
Gemini. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what happens when you have a full moon.
What does that have a significance? Full moon?
Yeah. Yeah. It has both good and bad significance,
Oh,
depending on who you read. Uh,
okay.
some astrologers say if you're born on a full moon, all the fruits of your life come early
Hmm.
rather than late.
Okay.
That you could be poor when you're old because you're rich when you're young and all that.
Okay.
I don't find that really true. Trump, for instance, Donald Trump is a full moon baby.
Okay.
He's a Gemini with Sag moon.
Oh,
He, he hasn't lost stuff, He's a billionaire,
yeah.
born rich and stays rich, So I you're a full moon baby.
Yeah.
It means that your life is like on a crescendo path rather than a skinny path.
What does
So
that mean?
very, very into relationships. Almost
Yes.
everything you do bounces off other people or the environment. Yeah.
Well, I may as well ask you this one question that I was going to ask later because we were talking about how this astrology system works. And
Hmm.
I guess I was wondering for people, because I come across, like, I'm very neutral and I go by what something helps me. So I'm not against things, but there are people I come across that will say, and I hope this doesn't offend you because this is just opinions of people what
Yeah.
I've heard, and I guess I wanted your insight on to maybe help people view astrology differently. But the ones that maybe are governed by more religious beliefs, and they believe that astrology is like, in their words, sometimes they use the word sin, or
Yeah. Yeah.
so I wonder how can someone kind of navigate that so that they can
Well,
have
right, right.
different.
It's mostly Catholics who are anti-astrology. Here's
Yeah.
here's a little thing about Catholics. Until about until the Renaissance, about 1500 AD, the Catholic Church actually supported astrology. And if you go to Europe and the Middle East, you'll see all these old churches, and they all have zodiac signs everywhere and everything, right?
Mhm.
Like astrology and the Catholic Church they were together like this until the
Hmm.
Renaissance, and people came along and said, "Oh no, we have to look at things scientifically, and this is a new scientific method." And science became a huge fad, and the Catholic Church went, "Oh my God, we're losing all our people over to science."
Mm,
So what they did is they banished astrology to make themselves look
okay.
more scientific. And since then, the
Oh,
Catholic Church has been anti-astrology. So it's
that
pure
and
politics.
that's I think one part of it, and then the other part of it, I guess I don't know if that has to do with the same thing that you're saying, um, but they were saying that if you're getting information about the future, it's like you're going against God's path because you're not letting God lead you. You're following something that's separate from him. Does that make sense?
Right.
So is that
Not
part of
really.
what you're saying? Well, I guess
I,
to get your insight on
yeah,
it, what about that can you say? Because I'd like to be able to also explain to people how it's not harmful and it's not something to fear,
yeah,
but sometimes they will approach me about it and I will feel a bit conflicted because I'll feel
yeah.
like it's one of my passions and I love
Right.
it. And then it's like, but then I hear, oh, it's against God. So how do I
Yeah.
approach that?
Well, in the Bible, very early in the Bible, it says you will not worship the sun, moon, or planet. Worship. The word is worship. That doesn't
Oh,
say don't study, don't know, don't learn. It says don't worship. In
ah,
other words, don't make them gods. Okay.
okay.
Um, that's the early instruction in the Bible. That's basically in Genesis or whatever, really near the beginning.
Mhm.
Um, as time goes on, in the Old Testament, There are fortune tellers and card readers and spiritualists and diviners and people like this and astrologers. They all look at the future, right? The Bible, or supposedly God, says these people must be put to death. All the diviners and card readers and fortune tellers that
Yeah.
need to be put to death, but not astrology. It doesn't mention astrology. And then you go through, and astrologers are used by Nebuchadnezzar, et cetera, Daniel, who is one of the saints, one of the great people in the Bible,
Yeah.
was an astrologer. So astrology was not condemned at all,
Okay.
but worshiping the planets
So how do you um,
was.
make that difference in your own
I know
life?
I haven't mentioned this.
Yeah.
Well, okay, this is again kind of to your question.
Mhm.
Is for instance, myself, I've got a Mercury. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. It's a very important planet to me
Mhm.
at 6 degrees Cancer.
Mhm.
One of the symbols of the 6 degrees is a huge plot of land marked out with a red boundary. Without even knowing this or whatever,
Mhm.
I have bought acreages like, I think the biggest one is 478 or something. The smallest was like half an acre or something. But every time I bought land, I've always profited. So I just bought, it went up, I sold it, da da da. Um, but that 6 degrees, also another symbol for it is a guy who cuts out, he has a beautiful dog and cuts the tail off because he's convinced it'll grow again. It doesn't. So one of the meanings of that 6 degrees is large plots of land. Another meaning is that you just don't take anything, you ignore your own luck. You don't hang on. You always think there'll be another lucky turn down the road, so you just get rid of whatever you have. And I've done that constantly. Every time a property went up, I sold it. There's a piece out here, 40 acres in the Lower Mainland in Langley, that I used to own and live on with the family. And a guy came along and offered, I bought for 450. Guy came along about half a year later and offered me 650 for it. I said, oh, okay, here you go. It's now worth about 15 million,
Oh my gosh.
and I'm not.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I've done that all. I buy, but then I also sell and get rid
So
of it.
how does that relate to worshiping versus not worshiping?
Well, to me, it relates to destiny. You were talking about
Right.
how do you follow God's path,
Yeah.
and your own path.
Yeah.
No matter how much I know this about myself, I probably learned this maybe 10, 20 years ago. No matter how much I know this, I just cannot stop selling. I can't stop getting rid of
Got
what's
it.
left. So it's
Yeah.
like, even when you don't, uh, here's an instance that's more human. Um, Say you had you had 5 children, and you had a single mother. The father walked off.
Mhm.
Then the 4 of the children also married, had had single children, and were
Mhm.
single parents because
Mhm.
the father walked off. And you're the fifth. You say that's not going to happen to me, no matter what. I'm not getting married till I'm after 30. I'm going to do it wisely. No matter what, I'm not going to be a single parent.
Mhm.
Well, that's what I said, and I have 4 kids, and I'm a single parent. I mean, they're old
Oh.
now; they're grown up, right? But
Ah.
it's kind of almost sort of, you can't avoid your destiny, and you
It's
can't avoid your DNA.
and
Same thing.
that was actually one of my questions. It was going to be the last question because I
Uh,
thought it would scare people if we went so deep right away. But I was going to ask you about free will
uh,
and destiny. So you do believe then that, like, how much of our destiny and free will is orchestrated to even have influence, or are we just, it is what it is and there's nothing
well,
we can do about it?
until about 10 years ago, I didn't believe in destinies per se. I thought it's what you make of it. You can go
Mhm.
this way or that way, make your choices, etc. But then I began to see that you could face a choice A or B, pick B, and you still end up at C. Even if you picked A, you'd end up at C. No
Yeah.
matter what path you choose, somehow you end up in the same destination. Maybe that's destiny. The advantage, though, of astrology or something like that is you can make the journey a lot more comfortable.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like if my destiny is I don't know, say I'm going to be broke at 95. That's my destiny. Well, until then, I can make as much money as I want and fool around and have a happy time. And to say, well, when I'm broke, that's that, right? I
Yeah.
didn't explain that very well, but
No, that makes sense to me. And then it brings me back to the whole like idea of sinning. Is that what people think of as sinning? Is that you're kind of like cheating your destiny by doing that? Is that sort of like,
I could see people thinking that. Yeah. The thing is, I
yeah,
don't believe you can cheat your destiny.
yeah. And I,
I
I
think
think
your
I'm like
destiny
you. I think that like I don't think you can cheat it. I think
is.
that whatever information is presented to you, it's there for a reason. Like back
Mhm.
in the day, if they didn't have that information, you weren't meant to have that.
Yeah.
But it's conflicting because you hear that and you're like, am I doing something wrong? But I'm glad that you see it that way. It is,
I take, yeah, I tend to take a quiet or a mellow or whatever view of most things. I mean,
yeah. I mean
uh,
it, but it is, if you really think about that concept, it is a bit it's a little scary
mhm.
because a lot of people will just kind of think, oh God, what's the point if I can't control anything? What's the point?
Well, you
Right.
can to a certain degree.
Yeah.
For instance, I can look at my aspectaria and I can say, oh, this afternoon, Moon is square Saturn. I won't go in the stock market and invest because I know the stocks I buy will lose. Or I won't phone up my girlfriend or my potential girlfriend
Oh,
because I know she's going to say, what? You know, then I look, say, tomorrow morning and the moon is trine Venus or Mars is trine Venus or whatever. And I go, oh, I'll, phone my girlfriend
yeah.
or, or whatever. So, and that actually works.
Oh, and
It
that's
works quite
interesting
well.
because your time over there is still early in the morning and it's afternoon for me. So how do those transits apply to different time zones?
Well, say the moon is at 5 degrees Gemini right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not, it's in Capricorn, but say it was. Well, it's in 5 degrees Gemini, whether I live in BC, Australia, Hong Kong, London, England,
Okay.
or wherever, right? The
Okay.
planets and the sun and moon
Oh,
don't
because of
change.
where the sun is. Yeah.
Yeah, but what it
Okay.
is when you're on the Earth and you're located, say, here on the Earth, as the Earth turns, that sun in the sky goes like this. I don't know
Right.
if you see that or not.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
sun and the moon and all the planets, they seem to move, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really the Earth that's moving. So say when we started this interview, no, let's see what it was. When we
Round
started this
one.
interview, Moon was trine Uranus. Well, it still is all most of the day. So, but it would say for me,
Mm-hmm.
it might be trine Uranus. Uranus might be in the ninth house, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's got a nice intellectual light or influence on
Interesting.
astrology. But for you, that Uranus might not be in the ninth of philosophy; it might be in the 11th of friendships.
Right.
And so for you, astrology now is a vehicle to friendship, or
Right.
it could be in the 10th, which
That's very
means,
cool.
uh-oh, sort of thing. So
So
depends where it is.
I guess
But
one
its
more,
position
yeah.
changes every 24 hours, right?
Yeah,
In
I
each
never
chart.
looked at it that way. When it comes to things like environmental climate change, like, are we destined for that too? Like, does astrology say like the earth is going to die? Like, how do, or it's not about,
No, I don't think, there's two things we have to remember. There's astrology and
mhm,
there's astrologers.
yeah,
And my feeling is astrology is 100% accurate.
uh-huh,
Astrologers are somewhere between 50 and 80,
right, right.
right?
Depends on how you interpret.
It's the interpretation.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are astrologers who study things like earthquakes
Hmm.
with Pluto and try and predict earthquakes and that. I don't know how accurate they are. I don't know how good it is. I didn't really, I just read an article and that was it, right?
Yeah.
But the major things like that, it's hard to see astrology really giving much insight into.
Well, do you remember back in the day, December 21st, was it? The whole or thing about the change in energetic, um, I forget what it called it. It was like a Mayan calendar.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Do you remember that? Like,
Oh, switch. The magnetic poles will switch.
Yeah. So do you
Yeah.
believe that? Like, did that influence
No, that's bunk.
astrology?
That's bunk.
Okay.
Those kinds of things have been going on for centuries.
Okay.
There's always somebody saying the sky is falling.
A-
To me, one of the benefits of astrology is a person can phone me up and I can tell them when to buy their home or when not to. And that can be advice worth $500,000, right?
Right.
Or to get surgery now or not. Relationships is somewhat same. You can look at two charts and you say, okay, you've got 9 bad aspects between you and 3 good ones. Toss this one.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's like just
But
more on the incompatible side than compatible. It's not
that one
worth.
would be, yeah. Or you can have, say, 15 good aspects and only 5 bad. You say, wow, don't let go of this guy.
Right. Right.
But that's only part of it. You also have to look, you may have all sorts of good aspects, but that person's Pluto could be square your sun or moon, which means the
Yeah.
relationship will never survive.
Right.
So it's better to tell somebody that before they waste 10 years,
Wow.
trying to make something survive.
Have you ever had people base their decision on things like that and break
Nobody
up
ever
or-
admits anything.
Yeah.
No. I think probably, just my off the top of my head estimate, I think probably half the people who I read for don't take my advice.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
hard. It's hard because when you hear that, you're so invested in the person and
yeah. Or especially when the advice is extreme. Like I can tell a person where to go to have the best career, in their life, to get the best career result. But it might be in India or Africa or
yeah.
somewhere in Russia, and they're not
Wow.
going to go for that reason, right?
Uh,
But you can still, they could do it or move for the best marriage, that sort of thing.
if someone does have whatever aspect you just wouldn't that come out and be expressed in the dynamic while they're dating? Wouldn't that?
Well, a little bit. The reason I mentioned Sun from a square Pluto, it is the killer, right? Or square moon, because the moon and the sun are what you are, what you want to be. The sun
Mhm.
is what I'm going to be when I grow up, right? But
Right.
Pluto is the unconscious, not the subconscious, but the unconscious.
Mm,
So Pluto, and that's why we call Pluto the planet of destiny, or at least I do. So,
interesting.
if you're you and the person you're with, you have suns trine and moons trine and all your super lovey-dovey. Way down deep there's something that's going to tear you apart, and it's a difference of opinion. Like, I love Trump, you love Biden, or something like this.
Right.
But it's things that don't naturally bubble to the surface. It
Until
slowly
you, yeah.
seeps to the surface. It's
Mhm.
almost like it just slowly seeps to the surface.
Yeah.
And when it does, then it presents you with these huge disagreements or problems or whatever. It can even work out in different ways. Like, two people could be very in love, but the sun square that Pluto.
Mm.
And so, say this is George and Georgina. Well, they're in love in that, but then George gets transferred from Toronto to London, England.
Yeah.
So Georgina goes, "What do I do? Do I give up my job and go with them or not?"
Hmm.
Say she gives up her job, that would split them apart if she didn't, right?
Yeah.
So she gives up her job and goes with him. They're there a year, and then he gets transferred to Yemen or something.
Hmm.
In other words, that Pluto keeps putting
Right.
major obstacles in the way of that relationship.
Huh.
And that's not apparent in the first. Sometimes it is, actually. I'll have people come in and they'll say, or I'll have a client and I'll say, this is a Pluto square, da da da. And she'll say, oh no, everything's fine. And I'll say, oh, okay, good. But they happen to be living in different cities. How come?
Mm.
They were
Wow.
together in the beginning. So a lot of people, even when the obstacles are there, they don't recognize them as obstacles.
Right. Wow.
Right.
That's scary.
I think it'd be better to find out early than
Yeah. I mean, I
in divorce
definitely.
court. I think because generally the media considers astrology to be bunk. It
Yeah.
is. I've had editors. I was talking to a guy. It was Conrad Black's people. They owned 450 newspapers, And I was in about 20 here. And I said, look, I'll give you my column free. Just put it there as
Wow.
long as my phone number's there, right?
Mhm.
He wouldn't do it. And he said, because you're a bunch of charlatans. And I go, well,
Wow.
how do you know? And he says, well, everything's 50-50. You say there's going to be a war, and there either is or isn't. You've got a
Mm.
50% chance of coming true no matter what you say, which is, which I really resent. Because if I say there's going to be a Gulf War in February, and it comes in February, that's not a 50-50 thing.
Yeah.
That's a 1 in 100 thing,
Mhm.
But anyway, editors are naturally skeptic and anti-astrology. The only reason they have columns is because they're popular.
Wow.
Probably what astrologers have fought for a long time, right?
I mean, for me, I had difficulties in my life, and when you're in that state, you're um, you're so vulnerable emotionally, mentally, spiritually, that when you do receive some kind of validation like that, it's, I don't know if uplifting is the right word, like empowering. It might
Mhm.
not take away the pain, but it softens it so you don't feel like you're going crazy and you don't
Yeah,
feel like there's something wrong with you.
yeah. Like I feel this way because I'm a Cancer and Mars came squared my moon or something.
Yeah.
It wasn't my fault in essence, right?
Yeah.
It's not something really wrong with me. It's or if it is wrong with me, I was born that way, so I don't have to feel
Yeah.
bad or whatever. Yeah.
And one of my questions was, I mean, I want to come back to relationships, but you brought up something interesting. That this was something related to what you're saying is, I don't know if you've ever kind of um, wrapped your mind around psychopathic behavior and people who are considered psychopaths
Mhm.
in the media. Like, can you see that in a chart?
Yeah.
And you,
Um, but there are things in astrology. For instance, if you're born with the sun and the moon and the rising sign all in the same sign, it's
oh,
as you grow up, it's very difficult for you to understand why other people do what they do and how they're acting or how they're feeling, because your
oh,
whole life has been you radiating out, right?
mm-hmm,
If you're born with the like you with the moon in the seventh, say Mars there and there,
mm-hmm,
even early in life, it's kind of you run up against walls, school hard knocks or whatever. So
mm-hmm,
by the time you're 30, you understand human nature. Whereas this
yeah,
person who had all that sun, moon, and everything in the same sign, it's
mm-hmm,
very hard for him to understand human nature.
yeah.
So that's a little bit, you know. There are also there are aspects that point to homosexuality, for instance.
Really?
There, yeah, there are aspects that point to schizophrenia.
I was going to ask about schizophrenia.
Yeah,
Can you share? I don't know if you can or not. Maybe it's
I don't
maybe.
want to say the aspects because
Oh, yeah, I
people
understand.
will go out and find out they have that aspect thinking.
Right, I understand.
So you have to be a little careful what you share, but there is definitely an
Same.
aspect. Yeah.
Because you know what, the reason well, that was going to be one of my questions, because I'm very curious. Like, we were talking about destiny, and a lot of times schizophrenia um is, it's thought of outside of our, I guess, control. I don't know what the right word is. Like,
I look at it more sort of like, excuse me, if a person is schizophrenic, it's
mhm,
usually in their DNA. And I think the DNA will actually even time the onset of it. Like your DNA might say, okay, you're going schizoid at the age of 31
wow, yeah,
or the age of 18 or whatever. I think that's baked in the DNA.
wow.
But the chart reflects the DNA. The chart, in a sense, is a picture of the
Is the
DNA.
DNA? That's what I always thought of it
To a
as.
certain degree, it is, yeah.
Yeah, I do see that.
So, yeah.
And so would you be able to see the timing of that, or see how it could develop in someone's life, or no? That's
Yeah, if you
too,
studied it closely enough, you could in somebody's chart. The
really.
thing is, I do a chart, but I don't go through, I don't spend days on a chart. I spend an hour,
Mhm.
you know.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so I don't
That's
usually go that deep,
not
but you
your like
could,
specialization. You don't go and research medical.
no.
Yeah.
Some people do. There's actually a huge book like this, Medical Astrology,
Oh, I need to
but
look that up.
I could give you the name of it sometime. But, I anyway,
That's
that's
a
another,
whole other ball
yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Um, but
you
yeah,
could time it in the sense that, say somebody's got, well, one of the things is that it involves Neptune and Saturn
yeah.
when they're
I can
not
see
quadrant.
Neptune.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because Neptune is fantasy,
fantasy and illusions and
spirituality, etc., and
yeah,
Saturn is hard rock, practicality,
right.
reality.
Yeah,
When those two
yeah.
clash,
Hmm.
one of them tends to take over. And
Right.
Neptune's stronger than Saturn. So,
Oh, is it?
oh yeah, the further out the
Uh,
planet, the stronger. Well, in astrological terms, the stronger it is.
Ah,
So, because it's the slower, is the stronger too. So the
so
moon go through your sign in
it's faster in
about
hot.
50 hours.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So
So
like
it's
Pluto
not
and
like you know.
Pluto and Chiron is very influential then.
Well, Pluto is. Chiron's an asteroid.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Alice and et cetera. Those are all asteroids. I don't
Mhm,
really study them or use them much because, just to my simple mind, it
mhm.
seems to me that something that is a lot more influence. Oh, it's something that's big, and say Jupiter should have a
Mhm.
lot more influence than this little rock that's only two
Okay.
kilometers long and
Yeah.
is in there with 50,000 other rocks.
I
So
was because
I think asteroids are.
I was
Go ahead.
reading about Chiron and it seems to influence
It's the wounded healer.
the woundedness. Yes. So I hear what you're saying about the degree of how much it influences us, but to some degree, I guess it can affect that wounded aspect
You
of
can use it
ourselves.
a little bit. Like if I have often older clients often have a lot of health problems and I have this one lady's uh, just constantly in what's she called, diversion disorder or something. But anyway, just can't find a solution. She goes to
Mhm.
this doctor, that doctor, that doctor. And so I find, oh, there's Chiron, and there's Jupiter hitting Chiron November 28th or something. So I
Yeah.
say, look, go on the phone or whatever and go find a doctor November 27 or 28, because there's some likelihood, because Chiron's the wounded healer, there's some likelihood that you'll
They can
find it
help.
who's had the same disorder as you
Ah.
and knows how to deal with it.
Oh, I thought a good astrologer can actually help in that way and connect to other people who can be of a
Well,
good
yeah, to me, that's the
synastry.
only reason for being one. I'm more a practical astrologer. I'm not really humanist or airy
Yeah.
fairy or woo woo.
But that makes astrology even more meaningful because then you're actually able to be proactive in your own life.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess before I switch it to another question, I just wanted to know, is there anything you can tell people who might have medical conditions like that they can change? Or I mean, other than what you just said about helping connect them to other people, is there something within their own destiny that you're able to tell them to do less of, to do more of, or is that something that can't be
Yeah,
influenced?
a little bit. I'm not a doctor or anything, so
Yeah.
it's always, to me, it's a little general. But you can see things like, say somebody's born in the 29th degree of Pisces, and they're having all trouble, neurological troubles and stuff.
Hmm.
And right in the book, the degree says, cure them with light, like bathe in light, right?
Oh.
So I say, go get a red hat or one of these red lights or whatever, and that should
Mhm.
work, But, it really just depends. Sometimes I'll have a client, well, often I'll have a client who says, well, I've got this real problem, da da da, physical problem. And I'll say, well, when did it start? And they'll tell me, and I'll say, or I'll guess, if it's, say, a nerve problem, I'll say, oh, did that start about 4 or 5 years ago? And they'll say, yeah. And so I'll say, well, don't worry, it'll end in 2 years, because by then Uranus will have done that out
Mm.
of that position, right?
Wow.
So if you can locate what's causing the problem, then you can often go back and see when it started. And if you can see when
Mhm.
it started and what the conditions were, like what sign it was in, et cetera, you can go to the end of it too and tell them it'll be over by then, or
Yeah.
improve or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I back to relationships, that talking about aspects, can someone, even if that aspect constantly comes, because everything goes around in a cycle, so are people doomed sometimes, like in that way, like in relationships, because who have aspects that close in on them. Are there ways to go around, or are some people just like doomed in when it comes to relationships?
Well, sometimes certain things are doomed, or just not going to work. An old saying in astrology that you can never get what your birth chart doesn't promise. Okay. So if your birth chart says you're never going to be a billionaire, you never will be, no matter how hard you work at it, right? But there are also certain ways to frame things. Like say Venus is square Pluto. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could say to the client, you're screwed. You'll never find true love. Destiny will screw you, right? Or I say to the client, okay, Venus is Taurus and Libra, Pluto is Scorpio. Don't get involved with any of those three signs. So everybody has parts of love, Arabic parts of love and marriage, etc. And they will inexplicably attract you to someone who maybe isn't compatible or is or whatever.
Right.
Like your part of love might be 18 Virgo. So all of a sudden, Virgos really speak to you.
Right. Are you able to see if people match like that in the sense of being destined and
Well, not destined, but yeah, I mean, I can see that a relationship is so good that I would say to the person, don't let this go.
Right.
Or it's so bad, I would say to the person, this is going to turn out badly. Get out this, or think about getting out. Sometimes I have clients who are going through a divorce or separation or something. And I can look at it and I say, well, you shouldn't feel guilty. You actually are doing something good for yourself by leaving this relationship.
Right.
So don't feel guilty about it. Be glad you finally got out.
Right. Are there certain aspects that you recommend people?
I always, to me, the greatest ones are Sun trine Sun. In other words, if you're an Aquarian, it could be Gemini or Libra. If you're a Scorpio, it could be Pisces, Cancer, right? So to me, that's the greatest indicator of compatibility. And then you look at Venus and Mars, because Mars is male sexuality and Venus is female. And if those two they're happening well, you're going a long way, But I don't think there's anything that says this is the love of your life.
Okay.
But if you just go on, not statistics, but go on the probability, if you've got somebody there who's connecting in a good way on, say, 15 points and only has a problem with 3 points, I would say your chances of finding that a similar person with similar aspects in your lifetime is probably rare. Yeah, once in 30 years or something. So in a sense, that does, mean you're destined.
Yeah, that's very
You
cool.
do see destiny in relationships sometimes, but not in the way that you're thinking of. It's more you see it in small things.
Is it possible for some people to be right for each other, but to have aspects where no matter what, they will always be argumentative and still be right for each other? Because I notice some people have aspects
who are argumentative with each other, but deeply love each other.
Yeah.
I knew this couple, I don't know if they're still alive now, but when I was with my wife, I knew this couple in Vancouver Island. They were in their 60s, late 60s. They'd been married for 40 years. They fought every day. But you also see people who don't seem to have a lot of, there's not a lot of emotional, romantic stuff between them, but they're comfortable with each other.
Right.
They hold hands at the end of the day and stuff. So a lot of it depends on the two people involved, how willing they are to love.
And what's important for them, because for some people emotions might be important, for other people it might not be.
That's true. So sometimes you have a really emotional partner and they'll have the very intellectual or whatever partner. That's when men used to say, who can understand women?
Yep. I do get men in that way, because emotions are very hard to deal with.
They're complicated.
Oh yeah. If a man can a man who do figure that out is a great man, because really he's done wonders for that woman. Do you believe that it's meant, relationship is meant to be effortless, or do you believe that it's never going to be 100% effortless, that there's always going to be,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of relationships where it's just so easy for people, and yet there are people who have so many difficulties. So
I don't know, everything's totally effortless. But you could have like I watch my daughter and her fiance, and they're always so happy together, and I always wonder why. You know, what's the secret? But they have their differences. But I'll notice he's often backing down. It's kind of, well, one guy long ago said the secret to a happy marriage is 2 words: yes, dear.
Yeah, I heard that.
You know, and there are people who just say, say it's a guy. He says, I love this woman. I love what she is, who she is, and all this. And, so she wants to go out and shoot pigeons at midnight. I still love her, you know. So what he does is he accepts anything that doesn't agree with him. When I was a young kid, my mom, single parent, right? But she'd have a boyfriend. And so if the boyfriend went out to the pub and drank every night, she'd go out to the pub with him and drink every night, even though she never drank beer before. So people accommodate a lot, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes too much, right?
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I don't know. There are also people who are addicted to
Drama.
chaos.
Yeah.
Chaos, but I didn't want to say that. It's people that are addicted to passion.
Right.
And sometimes the greatest passion comes, at least in the beginning, from signs that are square, like Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Scorpio, Leo, or something. In the beginning, because there's all that friction, it actually, because you're in love, the friction
Creates
transmutes,
passion.
you might say, into passion. Yeah.
Mm.
And it goes, that passion is so strong until the problems start to overcome it. And then you get guys like Bill and Hillary.
So you're saying eventually that breaks down?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Unless they're two really, really, really wise, mature people.
Mature, and unless there's other aspects that make them a good match.
I had the Sellners. You probably never heard of them, but they were quite a well-known therapist couple in the Lower Mainland, and they did marriage therapy, holding marriages together and stuff. And she was my client just once, and she said, any marriage can be fixed. We can fix any marriage. It's just a matter of, doing the right thing, right time, saying the right, programming yourself a bit psychologically, etc. Oh, okay. And I would say about 2 years later, it was in the news that she and her husband divorced. Well, if I looked at her chart and her husband's chart, if I looked at the relationship and there was problems with it, like say there were square signs or something, I would say, wow, good for you to holding it together, but she didn't, they didn't hold it together. To me, that you could call that destiny if you want.
Sorry, what's that aspect that you said is absolute no for relationships? The Pluto square, what?
Moon or sun. Oh, you're saying before the moon trine sun between two charts, etc.
Yes.
That doesn't really work.
No.
It may look like it works in some cases.
Oh.
I've seen clients where his sun was trying her moon, and her moon was trying his sun, and they lasted about 4 years. They broke up because the suns were square each other. Right? It was a Virgo Sag, but her moon and his sun were, and so was his sun and her moon.
Would you say fifth house plays a really big role?
You might see it as it's the one that starts love. See, the fifth is romance, the seventh is marriage, the eighth is sex, the ninth is wedding. So there's a whole process, right? And usually you fall in love before you have sex or marry or whatever, right? So that's what fifth is. It's that feeling of overwhelming liking somebody.
I always thought it also creates a playfulness and continues continuity and fluidity of ease and romance. No?
No, that helps. Sure.
Yeah.
The fifth is, it rules romance, but it also rules creativity.
Yes.
Sports, games.
Yeah.
Raising children, having fun with children.
Yeah.
Anything that's beautiful or pleasurable.
Yes.
And so romance fits that bill so much more than
Yeah.
a lot of other things, right? Right.
Yeah, I guess it all depends on where in your chart is the theme. I think I've always connected to fifth house, maybe because my north node is Leo. So maybe that's why.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And the North Node being in Leo would say that chasing all the Leo things like romance, but
mhm.
also just doing third house things like communications, etc., because that's your third, right? To Gemini.
Oh,
Those things are good for you.
oh, I see. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
because the North Node's in Leo.
Because
For
it
the South,
aims to for your highest, like,
it kind of supports you in a karmic way or something. Yeah.
hmm hmm
On the other hand, Aquarius is your South Node. I didn't realize that, but if Leo's your North, Aquarius your South. So I rescind my advice about
Yeah,
Aquarius.
that's what it was. I forgot to mention. That's why I realized Aquarius is not for me because it's in my
Yeah.
south node. That's another
Now,
question.
there's one thing about that is that in about 10% of cases,
Mhm.
that South Node represents the destined mate.
Oh,
But that's 1 out of 10. You
yeah.
know,
I feel like when someone is in my south node, it's not doesn't work for
it's
me.
usually bad.
So
Yeah, they're usually a
yeah.
bad influence.
I did have a question, but I wonder, can someone still have success with the person who's south node, who has that conjunction between south node and moon,
Uh,
or is it unlikely to
um,
work? Oh,
I think so. Remember, 10% of those aren't going to be good. 1 in 10 is going to be good. So this could be the 1 in 10, right? But that aside, the South Node's there. What you would kind of find happening here, say a South Node's on your moon.
mm-hmm,
I go ahead and marry and everything.
mm-hmm.
It means that something karmic is going to affect his emotions. I mean, people could be in love and marry and have children and all that, and still, his optimism is
Mm.
depressed a bit. And from that could come lower health or the inability to hold a job for a long time or the inability to advance in his job. And he may find that he's running into all these little glitches here and there. But if you look at the whole picture,
Mhm.
um, what's better? To not have that problem and be alone, or
Right.
to be in a happy marriage and have that
Yes.
side problem?
That's how I see it.
The people who
Mm.
are want to know because they have to make a decision.
Yeah.
There are people who
Yeah.
simply, it's a wish factor. Just, oh,
Yeah.
what's my life giving me?
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
when I was younger, I'd say in my 30s and 40s, I would say 80% of my clients were wishful thinkers. They
Yeah.
came to see me to hope that I would say, oh, everything's so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I say 80% of my clients are, what's going on, man?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because the clientele's a bit older. But,
Yeah.
well, actually, I shouldn't say that because a lot of my clients now are born in the 90s. Like they're
Oh,
born, a lot of I just realized the other day, a lot of my clients
we're
were
from the
born
90s.
after I started my astrology.
Ah, interesting. So about fixed versus unfixed charts. A friend of mine mentioned that she went to an astrologer and she told her you have a very unfixed chart, so there's a lot of room for movement. And it gave me a realization that, oh, maybe my chart is so fixed, and that's why I come across like my free will is not as as open.
Uh,
It,
well, in astrology, the word fixed as a
Mhm.
specific reference, it refers to 4 signs:
Okay.
Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo.
Oh, right, right.
Those are fixed signs. To a certain degree, it means they don't move. Those are the most stubborn signs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So we call them fixed. It's a
Mhm.
euphemism for being stubborn, right?
Yeah.
But it also has other things. They're the signs of the most stamina, etc. They're
Mhm.
also the 4 signs that have the most cataclysmic upheavals in their life every once in a while. Because they're so, like Scorpio, for instance. Scorpio says, I'm going to hide all my emotions no matter what I go through. So they hide it for 4, 5, 6 years. And then all of a sudden they explode like a volcano because they just
Yeah.
can't do it anymore. So these signs often have, Aquarius, for instance, hates to be changed. You try and change an Aquarian, they
Oh,
fight you tooth and nail, even to death.
really?
But one thing Aquarians love to do is change everybody else, right?
Yeah.
So, but they are, the fixed signs just mean that they tend to be, rigid. They tend to get in their
Okay.
groove and stay there.
Even though I read a book on eighth house that there are more difficulties, people who have eighth house planets,
I don't know that that's
hard to
true, really.
say. Yeah, because there's other
But
aspects with people who don't have eighth house that might have difficulties. So
yeah, any house can have it has its
yeah.
rewards and its difficulties. You know,
Um,
depends what's in the house.
okay.
If you
Okay.
have three malefic planets in that house, it's going to be a
Mm,
problem. But if you have
right.
Venus and Jupiter there, you're going to be a very successful business person and make loads of money. So
Right.
it's
Yeah. I was gonna say something about how my friend had moon in eighth house, but moon could be the mother, and eighth house is associated with death, and her mother died. And I'm just wondering, like, that's very telling, but
uh,
I didn't really notice that aspect until after her mother passed. And she
uh,
would say, "Why didn't anyone tell me? Like, if only I could have known," because it was something that if medically she had looked at, she could have saved her. So I'm
yeah.
just wondering, is that very telling? Like, can you look at someone's
Um,
aspects and tell them that their family member or someone close to them will die? And
yeah, that's usually Pluto. Pluto
uh-huh.
represents death. Well, as you said, right? Um, people sometimes, my dad's in iron lung or whatever. When's he
Mhm.
gonna pass on, or is he, or whatever? So I look at Pluto and say, oh yeah, his ruler Saturn's hitting Pluto, May 2021. So
Okay.
I wouldn't depend on him being alive too much longer after that sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
It's considered unethical to predict death,
Of course. Yeah.
um, but
Yeah.
not birth. So, but don't
Mhm.
forget that eighth house represents death, but also represents
Rebirth.
birth. Period.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
pregnant. Pregnancy is the eighth house.
Huh. I didn't think
See?
about that.
So that's where people go away, but it's also where they come in. You can
Interesting.
also tell when people are dying, or like I'll have a client come in and say, my dad just died 2 months ago. Da da da. I can look it up and I say, whoa, he died when Jupiter's trine the sun. He's on a good journey. Like in
Oh,
other words, he's going to heaven. He's doing
okay.
well.
Wow. Would you say
But if
that's
he died like Mars is square Saturn, yeah. Sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
well, I mean, I guess no one knows what happens to us after we die, but it's
I don't think it's
you think the aspects can tell you where they're at after
in
death?
a sense, yeah, yeah,
Really?
yeah, where they're going. The
Wow.
afterlife is not that mysterious. I
No?
mean, no, it's a state of peace and
Mhm.
knowledge and awareness, and it's just not physical like this one.
Where am I at? Vedic versus Western, because I came across different astrologers with different backgrounds. Are you
Yeah,
for Vedic, or do you think it's not as accurate as Western, or
no, I don't think that. It's really tropical versus sidereal,
okay.
and the Vedic systems are sidereal. They're two really, really different systems.
Hmm.
Um, Tropical astrology or Western astrology is you go, well, Moon's trine Sun, it's a good time to accomplish and blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
Vedic astrology is, okay, this person has this pattern in their chart.
Hmm.
This is going to happen to them when they're 32 years old.
Wow.
Vedic is
Wow.
extremely predictive
Wow.
and it's extremely complex. It comes from India, right? So
Hmm.
it's 4,000 years old anyway. Vedic
Yeah.
astrology has probably 100 different branches, none of,
A
none
hundred
of
different
which
what? Oh,
branches.
branches. Okay.
Yeah, like there's Jain Vedic, and there's all sorts of different Vedic astrologies. And a lot of
Okay.
them have nothing to do with each other in a sense.
Hmm.
But Vedic is basically works on patterns, especially human patterns. And they have all sorts of what they call, what do they call them? I forget. But they'll have a pattern that says, oh, this is the pattern of a person who will be a prince.
Hmm.
This is a commoner. This is a highwayman. This is, and they go like that. They're very precise. I don't know if they're right or not because I haven't studied. I've studied Vedic in a sense. I've read some books that have been translated to English.
Hmm.
But to really know Vedic astrology, you would have to learn Sanskrit because most of the
Okay.
stuff there is not in English.
Yeah.
And that's a huge undertaking and one I'm afraid I've been way too lazy to do. You know,
Yeah. I always wanted to find a Sanskrit translator
yeah.
because I had someone go to India and give my birth information and they printed something quickly. It was like a bunch of pages and I don't know what it says.
All
So,
right. Oh yeah, you get somebody to read it. Yeah.
yeah. So
Well,
that's,
you know what Indian clients, East Indian clients do when they go to see an astrologer, they always bring a bouquet of flowers.
huh.
And you think there's some pretty smart psychology behind that. Because the astrologer can have a bad day or be in a bad mood and say all the bad things in the chart. He just notices them.
Oh,
Or if he's in an optimistic mood, he notices all the good
okay.
things. So you
Mhm.
bring him a bunch of flowers, and he's more likely to give you the good news.
Okay.
So,
I like that because
yeah,
you're going to be a
it
little
points,
bit lighter on you.
well, it also points out that astrologers aren't that objective.
Yeah.
A lot of what they say is governed by their own mood.
It's very hard to find. You seem to be a very objective astrologer, but I think it is very hard to find any human being who can be close to 100% objective. It's
Oh,
very,
yeah,
very
yeah,
difficult.
impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or back to Vedic and Western. If someone is wanting to decide on which astrologer or which type to try, I find it is very different because the moon sun placements are different. So how do you choose? How do you
Oh, they're different because one's sidereal. In other words, way back, say in 2000 BC,
Mhm.
in East Indian astrologers decided that that point was zero Aries. And the whole zodiac follows from there, right? 1 degree Aries and around. And that never changes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Western astrology accounts for precession of the
Mhm.
zodiac. So what's 1 degree Aries in the year 2000 BC could be 20 degrees Aquarius by today,
Okay.
because that the tropical or Western zodiac constantly moves very slightly.
Mhm.
Like over 72 years, I was born, my son was 15 Gemini. Um, about 72 years, I'm 73, so it's just starting to happen.
Mhm.
It's moving into 17 Gemini
Hmm.
instead of 15, because it will move a bit more than a degree over 70 years.
Okay.
So that's why you'll find the sun and moon and all those placements are different. You know, late Taurus, we will call Gemini, they will call it Taurus, sort of thing.
Interesting.
But if you go and read what they say about late Taurus, gee, it sounds a lot like Gemini.
Gemini.
Right?
Yeah.
They're saying the same thing, but just through a different lens. Well, even
It's
in Western astrology,
mm,
you'll get different placements
okay.
because Campanius or a Placidian or a cock, or there's all these
Yeah.
different methods of calculating the chart, the cusp of the houses.
Mhm.
So some Westerns will put that north node in the ninth and some in the 10th.
Okay.
The real secret is you don't have to worry
Mhm.
because there's a real smart guy called Michael Gauquelin,
Mhm.
a French statistician.
Mhm.
About in the 1950s, he set out to disprove astrology. He collated tens of thousands of charts of famous people, politicians and athletes and etc.
Oh,
He
cool.
found that he actually ended up proving astrology because he found that athletes would always have Mars. Well, not always, but a significant portion, a statistically significant portion would have Mars either here or there. All actors would have Venus there. All politicians would have Jupiter there. It
Mm.
wasn't all, but it would be so significant that it could not be refuted statistically.
Right. That's interesting.
But what he found was the 10th house is like he would say a politician would have Jupiter in the 10th, right? Most politicians. Um, well, what he found was that say he's a Scorpio, we
Mhm.
got a Scorpio chart, and we got that Jupiter in the 10th. The people that say examined 1,000 Scorpios,
Mhm.
you would have 1,000 Jupiters up there as dots. At least a third of those dots. Here's a division between the 10th and the ninth, right?
Mhm.
Here's the ninth, here's the 10th. At least a third of those dots would be in the side of the ninth, not the 10th.
Oh, okay.
Well, the 10th house doesn't really just start here and go over.
Right, right.
10th house is really kind of,
Yeah.
it's not like we
There's
go from,
degrees.
yeah, we don't go from white to red. We go from white to pink to red.
Right, right, right. It's a
And
spectrum.
he hasn't been embraced by the astrology community because they don't want to admit that.
Oh, but that, I mean, you could easily see that on a chart. So how do you
Yeah,
not admit that?
I don't know. But to them, it goes against the traditional rules. It says it has to be in the 10th. That's not right. The 10th isn't that angle. It's
Yeah, yeah.
that sort of broad thing, right? Well, if you look at a lot of like famous people,
Mm-hmm.
like Freud and Sigmund Freud,
Mm-hmm.
you know, revolutionized psychology, right? You look at here's a Taurus. You look at his chart and you go, what the heck? There's nothing impressive here. All his planets are in the 12th. Well, the 12th, a third of the 12th is the first.
Yeah.
So so he had all that personal power.
Yes, yes.
But looking at the traditional way, you'd say, well, no, he was just a quiet, passive guy.
Right.
They
You
think he
have
was
to
12.
yeah, you'd have to interpret.
Well, you have to see how close
know.
it is to the angle.
Yeah. It's more religious than spirit. How come there's an association to spirituality with Sagittarius?
There shouldn't be.
No?
No, Sagittarius likes to give the codes, the logic, the Sagittarius
I
would have
know it's
written the
about
Bible,
ethics and morals, but I thought that
but it's also
extends
about
into spirituality.
well, in a sense, it does. But
Mhm.
Sagittarius is like, I want to write the Bible. Sagittarius would have
Oh,
written the Bible.
yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
But Pisces, which is a really spiritual sign,
Right.
often it doesn't have anything to do with religion or is confused by it or whatever. I always thought of religion as the box we try to put the spirit into.
I know what you're saying, but I always saw it in the way that religion is just meant to bring out the spirituality. It's just supposed to be a platform to bring out the spirituality. It's not meant to be to box someone in. So I think
Let's
it's just
hope. I don't know. It just depends.
yeah.
To a large degree, religion has become a way of governing the masses.
Mhm.
You know. Well, I think religion can be a very good thing. It codifies the spirit. You know,
Yeah.
and it gives us a code to live by. If
Yeah.
we just depended on Pisces psychics all the time, the world would be a mess
Right. There's
because
no
we have all the
structure.
insight and information and all
Yeah.
that.
I think it's supposed to go hand in hand. It's supposed to
To be
help.
totally disorganized.
It's
It's
supposed to be
supposed to.
integrated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But human nature takes over, I think, like the residential schools, pedophilia. About a month ago or so, 330,000 boys were, anally raped by the priests. So to me, the Catholic Church is, I think, evil. It's outlived its usefulness.
Wow.
But I think a new religion is coming, a big one. But it might take a couple hundred years to get here. I think it was 1984, but in the mid 80s, I used to make a lot more predictions than I do now, right? I was a lot more confident that they would come true, I guess. But I said the Catholic Church is going to die. It's going to be so full of corruption, it's just going to die.
Wow.
And I said that in 1984 in my column, and then years went by, nothing happened. The Catholic Church is dying. Oh my God, I made another boo-boo. But look at it now; it's imploding.
Wow.
So
There was an astrologer online. I just remember reading his article once. This was a long time ago. He made an association of the transits and the planets to bombings, like school bombings, and he was saying something about how there's a lot of inner like self-esteem issues and rejection, and so specifically around that time, if those kids would have been kinder, then maybe it wouldn't have impacted that child or whoever was doing the shooting that way. Child who is mentally still growing and can't make sense of things in that moment, to be rejected is so immense that they think the only way out is to shoot someone.
Revenge.
And so it's so sad.
Oh, I know. Well, there are the anti-bullying initiatives now, right? About the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
How effective they've been, I don't know. But it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at society, maybe you have to be as old as I am. But if you look at society, you look and you say, almost every year, at least every decade, society grows more aware, more compassionate, more merciful. You know, I mean,
Mm.
back in the 19th century, nobody even had welfare. You know,
Right.
welfare was brought in by World War II. You know, so it's like
Wow.
unintended consequences or whatever. But we are so. I'm not saying we're angels or anything, but we're slowly going there. Mankind is slowly getting more and more aware, more spiritual, more ethical, more merciful.
Hmm.
I mean, we are. Look at how we treat homeless people now. 50 years ago, they were just being rounded up and thrown out somewhere, right?
Right.
It's I'm not picking a good example. I wish
No,
I
no,
could,
I see what you're saying, that there
but
every year there's just more and more awareness. There's more movement
yeah, we grow.
towards
Yeah,
understanding and
yeah. Like in 30 years ago, nobody cared about bullying, but
yeah.
now it's become an issue and a part of the
Hmm.
consciousness, etc. You know, it's always been amazing to me that 55 Spaniards could come and land in the Caribbean there and take over the entire Inca Empire of millions of soldiers.
Hmm.
How did they do that? Well, they partly did it by the Incas thought they were gods and blah blah blah, right? And trickery, etc. But also Pizarro and all those guys, when they grew up, life was really violent. Like children were treated extremely violently, so they grew up to be, real violent warriors,
Violent, yeah.
and they would have 10 times the aggression of an average Inca or whatever.
Wow.
So it's there's a really fascinating book. It's called I think it's just called Childhood by a French guy called Philip Aries,
Oh,
A-R. I think it's Aries, like Aries, right? But it shows you just over the centuries how children were
child.
brought up differently, right?
Wow. I'd love to read that. That's cool.
It's interesting. Like in the I think it was around the 12th or 13th century or something. Um, Children were not considered children; they're just considered little adults. They didn't realize there was a difference, right? And
Wow.
they'd have sex orgies and everything. They'd have 6-year-olds in there and everything.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was
At
considered
what
quite
century?
normal.
At what
That's
period?
around the 11th or 12th in the Middle Ages. I
Oh
was
my
in the King's
God.
Court, in the King's Court in France. They would all stand around the little 6-year-old. They say, "Okay, raise the drawbridge," and you go, "What?"
That's insane.
Yeah,
That's a
gives you a
lot
right.
of change when you look at that difference. Oh my God.
Oh
The
yeah,
world
it's huge.
really did change.
Yeah.
Thank you again so
Yeah.
much. You've been so amazing, Tim. It was
Oh, thanks, Tammy.
so lovely to talk to you.